Welcome back to Area DMG. I'm your host, Philip Wesley, the Mile High Mouth, and for today's episode of Area DMG and Suki Nihon for Area DMG, we are looking at Steven Universe episodes 8 and 9 of Season 4, Gem Harvest. It's been a while since we've reviewed any Steven Universe stuff because there wasn't anything new for the longest time, and quite literally, I didn't want to go back and review the old stuff because I was like, maybe I'll get back to that when the series ends and after the 5th season. But yeah, I was just like, hiatus stuff, you know? Anyways, this is a 2-part episode, and well, with a name like Gem Harvest, you kind of hope that it has some type of meaningful feel to it. Like, you know, that sounds dramatic, like Gem Harvest. I mean, it's gotten really cold and harvesty over here and all that, you know. We just got our most recent snow out here in Colorado, and Colorado, and well, Gem Harvest, where to begin? It starts where Steven shows up at Lapis and Peridot's barn, and they've started planting vegetables because they're bored. Both Lapis and Peridot seem a little bit annoyed that their vegetables are not alive. Peridot gets this really great quote in here. She's like, "But what is the use of corn?" And I'm like, okay, that actually is pretty funny. So Steven decides to bring a pumpkin to life for them, and then, after admitting to them eventually that they weren't the ones who brought it to life, he dramatically traumatizes it by carving a pumpkin. And okay, that scene is actually pretty hilarious. This particular episode has some pretty decent little jokes in it, but the best joke is the little pumpkin sitting there, and then Steven's like, "Oh, my dad taught me to do this." He goes, "First you cut a smile, and then the eyes," and he's doing this, and the pumpkin's all like, and I'm just like, that's the kind of horribly morbid sense of humor that I like in this show, so it's nice to see it. But yeah, after doing that, they decide, well, they'll probably do something else with the rest of the corn. They're not sure what to do with it. And then a new character shows up and starts yelling at Lapis and Peridot for taking over his barn. Turns out that new character is Andy. He's Steven's uncle, and he's voiced by the same guy that did Carl in Aqua Teen Hunger Force. And here he gets to be appropriately just borderline Carl, but not really. Kind of a kid-friendly version of Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Anyways, he is Steven's uncle. And you find out that Steven's last name is not Universe, it's DiMaio. And so, Andy is a little bit annoyed at this, and Steve's like, maybe he can convince Andy to get along with everyone and to let them stay in the barn if, well, he decides to throw like a Thanksgiving-style dinner for them. So all those vegetables and stuff they were growing get put to good use. So, yeah. The way they characterize Andy when he first shows up, when he first starts talking to Greg and all that, there's like little bits of, sometimes, okay, all the time, you'll note that the writers in this show and Rebecca Sugar tend to wear their politics on their sleeves, to the point where you have Andy kind of make an allusion to like, oh, they're all illegal aliens, and getting mad at Greg over Rose and Greg not being married. Then there's a little bit there where Pearl has this thing that's like, well, we knew you talked about marriage, so let's all marry everyone. I'm like, political satire, if it's either too overt, doesn't work, it has to be kind of subtle. And Steven Universe doesn't actually have any subtlety to this. It's one of the biggest flaws with the writing, aside from continuity errors and all sorts of other issues. But this episode here, pretty much they're trying to put together a little Thanksgiving meal for Andy, and you get a little bit of bonding time between Andy and Steven and Greg as they kind of catch up a bit. You hear a little bit about Greg's family, and overall, this seems to work out okay until they get to a really awkward sequence in the during the actual feast or whatnot, during the actual meal, where the other gems they start making a little bunch of recappy style in jokes between each other, and they start to exclude Andy. They cut him off from saying something, and then they don't let him get back to it. Because remember, they're not human. They don't have actually a human understanding or sensitivity to actual emotions. Then Andy decides to wander off in his plane, and Lapis and Steven follow him. They convince him to come back. Well, Steven convinces him to come back because what happened with Andy is that everyone slowly started moving away. Everything started changing really rapidly, and he is just not comfortable with the idea of everyone not being together. In other words, he's one of those people who's just like a little bit nostalgic for everyone being together as a family, and doesn't feel that he can be included in the in the crystal gems, or with Greg's new or Steve's new essential family. And this makes him feel excluded and angry. Eventually, Steven explains to him that no, there's a spot for him there. He just needs to also make an effort to be there too. So eventually, they bring him back down to the ground, and they finish up the whole meal thing, and everything's happy and good. It's a cute little episode. There's a couple really good jokes in it that kind of hit. They also let the guy. I keep wanting to call him Carl, because he's voiced by the same guy as Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and I recently marathoned that entire series. So yeah. Anyways, Andy. Andy decides this is all good, this is fine, and we'll probably won't see Andy again for a couple dozen episodes, if at all. But yeah, pretty much what happens here is just it's kind of a Thanksgiving episode. I think they were trying to make it be like Pieces of April or something, but no. Overall, I thought it was cute. Some pretty decent little jokes. Pretty good animation. Not much happens here. We do get a little bit of character development in that we find out find out more about Greg's family, or rather Steven's family, and we get his actual last name, which is DiMeo. So yeah, not a lot of information. I feel like the episode probably could have been condensed into 11 minutes, but they needed something, and they needed something they could show for Thanksgiving. So yeah, there we are. I thought it was an okay episode. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of that episode. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. So in other words, just make sure you like, subscribe, share, and all that good stuff. And until the next episode comes out, which I think is actually, the next episode of Steven Universe is sometime in December. And that one seems to have like a bit of backstory from like the first year that Steven was alive. So that should be interesting to see what they do with that. But I think they kind of had to have this episode in here so that you actually, just to let you know that the universe is not actually his last name, which I thought was kind of weird. Like, you don't need a whole episode for that. I felt like the whole episode, there were parts where this was just kind of dragging, but it did have some good jokes. But anyways, yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think and all that stuff. And until the next episode comes out, you are now caught up.